Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump speaks on the phone with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. The call comes on the heels of Ukraine's weekend drone attack. Arian Pazdar has what the two discussed. The White House defending the big, beautiful bill as Elon Musk goes a step further in trying to tank the legislation. What are the sticking points, and will the bill increase or reduce the national debt? The Trump administration escalates its fight with Columbia University, declaring the school doesn't meet accreditation standards for its failure to protect Jewish students, what Education Secretary Linda McMahon said in a statement today. The White House press secretary under former President Biden announces she's quitting the Democratic Party. The news comes ahead of the release of her new book that'll give readers an inside look into the weeks that led to Biden's abandoning his bid for a second term. Authorities arrest a 32-year-old man alleged to have played a hand in a recent bombing outside a Palm Springs fertility clinic. David Lamb brings us the latest.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump today speaking by phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The call comes after a series of high-profile attacks on Russia by Ukraine. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the details.
President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin had another phone call on Wednesday afternoon. Trump said, "We discussed the attack on Russia's docked airplanes by Ukraine and also various other attacks that have been taking place by both sides." Kiev recently used drones to strike several Russian air bases. Ukraine says it destroyed many of Russia's nuclear-capable bombers. And Ukraine also posted this video saying it attacked a bridge connecting Crimea to Russia. The rail and road bridge is a key supply route for Russian forces in Ukraine. According to Trump, it was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. President Putin did say, and very strongly, that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields. Special envoy to Russia and Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, tells Fox News that the attack could raise the risk of escalation.
And I'm telling you, the risk levels are going way up. I mean, what happened this weekend, people have to understand in the national security space, when you attack an opponent's part of their national survival system, which is their triad, the nuclear triad, that means your risk level goes up because you don't know what the other side's going to do.
The nuclear triad Kellogg mentioned are the three capabilities each power has to attack with nuclear warheads. Those are strategic bombers and sea and air-launched ballistic missiles. Kellogg says the actual damage to the bombers is less important than the psychological impact it has on Russia. The Russian side on Wednesday confirmed that the call took place and that Trump and Putin spoke about the recent attacks.
Trump reaffirmed that the Americans had not been informed about the attack in advance. Naturally, the leaders agreed to continue contacts on the Ukrainian issue, including at the highest level.
Russia on Wednesday also suggested that it's not interested in ceasefires or meetings with Ukraine at the moment. Ukraine has suggested talks since the start of the conflict, but was mostly turned down by Russia. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
The Trump administration is taking action against Columbia University, saying the school violated Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and therefore no longer meets the standards of the organization that accredits the university. A press release from the Education Department says that its Office for Civil Rights and the Department of Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights, quote, determined that Columbia University acted with deliberate indifference towards the harassment of Jewish students since October 7th, 2023. The Trump administration said today it has notified the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, the school's accreditor. In the Middle East, all of the aid distribution centers in the Gaza Strip shut down today to make upgrades. This comes after multiple shooting incidents have happened around them. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader has rejected the U.S. proposal for a nuclear deal and says Iran will continue enriching uranium. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
The newly established aid distribution centers in the Gaza Strip have continued to make headlines since they recently opened. On Tuesday, Israeli forces said they fired at suspicious individuals who deviated from the approved access route and were advancing suspiciously toward them. And on Sunday, unknown gunmen were also seen firing at people waiting at one of the distribution centers. However, the Israel Defense Forces spokesperson says the Gaza Aid initiative is proving effective.
Gazan residents are coming to the distribution centers to receive the aid. The civilian population of Gaza understands that Hamas is not taking care of them. On the contrary, Hamas is actively trying to prevent them from receiving the aid.
On Thursday, all of the aid distribution sites were closed for upgrades, according to the organization that runs them, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. In a post on Facebook, they said the centers will be closed for update, organization, and efficiency improvement work, and that they'll reopen on Thursday. At the same time, Israel continues intense military operations in the territory and reportedly struck a tent in the northern Gaza Strip on Wednesday. One of the residents nearby said he's not sure where to go to for safety.
We fled from the far north of Gaza to the port in Gaza City because they told us to head to the west of Gaza City, the safest place. Unfortunately, there is no safe place in Gaza.
Meanwhile, residents in the southern Gaza Strip were seen leaving Khan Yunis on Tuesday after the Israeli army issued an evacuation order. And in another development, Israel reported that 2 projectiles were fired at Israel from Syria. Israel said they then used fighter jets to strike weapons belonging to the, quote, Syrian regime. And they said the Syrian government is responsible for the current situation in Syria and will bear the consequences as long as hostile activity continues from its territory. And in a separate development, the supreme leader of Iran has rejected a U.S. proposal for a nuclear deal. He said Iran will continue enriching uranium for peaceful purposes, which Israel says is not true. The U.S. and Iran have held 5 rounds of talks so far, and President Trump said that if a deal is not reached, quote, there will be bombing. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Former White House press secretary under the Biden administration, Karine Jean-Pierre, announced today that she's leaving the Democratic Party. The news was shared by the publisher of her new book titled Independent, A Look Inside a Broken White House Outside the Party Lines, which is set to be released on October 21st. Today's announcement from Legacy Lit said the book will take readers, quote, through the 3 weeks that led to Biden's abandoning his bid for a second term and the betrayal by the Democratic Party that led to his decision. Jean-Pierre was criticized during her tenure as press secretary for being evasive about Biden's physical condition. She discusses in the book why she switched to independent after working in 2 Democratic administrations. The Congressional Budget Office now says the big, beautiful bill would add over $2 trillion to the national debt. Elon Musk also intensifying his criticism, but the White House refuting such claims, insists the agenda will cut spending and reduce the deficit. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. Tell us more about the heated debate here.
Sure, good evening to you as well, Tiff. So the Trump White House is actively pushing back as the Congressional Budget Office today released a new analysis. It's saying that the big, beautiful bill supported by President Trump is estimated to increase the national debt by $2.4 trillion over the next decade. And as you can hear the motorcade behind me, GOP senators were just meeting with President Trump at the White House. And right now they're saying that they had a very constructive discussion with the president where everyone got to voice their opinions, adding that it's necessary for this bill to pass to give Americans the largest tax cut in history. Meanwhile, it comes, though, as Elon Musk, a big ally of President Trump's and also who just recently left the Doge department, and says that he is against this bill. And today he escalated his attacks by calling on voters to call their congressional offices and urging lawmakers to help, quote, kill the bill. He further threatens that he will help fire lawmakers who vote yes to this bill in next year's midterm elections. And meanwhile, the House Speaker today saying that Trump told him that he's not happy to hear Musk's 180. Watch.
I talk to President Trump, all the time, multiple times a day. Obviously, we've talked about this. As you know, he's not delighted that Elon did a 180 on that.
The bill is a centerpiece to President Trump's legislative agenda so far. It's going to ask for more funding to boost for the border as well as for Defense Department, and it's also going to extend Trump's expiring 2017 tax cuts, which is an important element in the bill, as Republicans put it. It's also going to slash spending when it comes to, for example, funding for food stamps as well as Medicaid, as well as climate-related initiatives. Meanwhile, the White House, in refuting the Congressional Budget Office estimate, says that it's really based on a wrong baseline, as is relying on what they call a false assumption that Trump's 2017 tax cuts will not be extended. And the OMB director, Russ Vought, also echoing that argument. Watch.
Not only does it give a fair shake to economic growth, but it fundamentally misreads the economic consequences of not extending current law tax relief. I mean, the degree to which we would have a recession or worse if the tax relief is not extended is something that they just fundamentally do not factor into their analysis.
The White House is also stressing that the bill will include $1.6 trillion in mandatory saving, and is adding that the fact that even the CBO itself provides an estimate saying that revenue from Trump's tariffs will actually bring in an estimated $2.8 trillion, which, even if the CBO estimate about the increase in deficit is true, will still offset the number and slash the overall deficit by about $500 billion over the next 10 years. The White House, meanwhile, is also calling to question the CBO's credibility itself by showing financial contribution records, which NTD has reviewed, showing that among the staffers who have donation records to political campaigns within the CBO, they're overwhelmingly donating to Democratic-backed causes, organizations, as well as candidates. Meanwhile, it remains to be seen, though, if the latest attacks by Elon Musk will actually change any lawmakers' mind or solidify any of the opposition already by the remaining few holdouts in the GOP and the Senate side. And of course, President Trump wants to see this bill on his desk by July 4th, which was when the congressional recess will begin. And remains to be seen, though, if that deadline or that timeline will now be a tall task. Back to you.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. Coming up, more states have been defending themselves against China's unrestricted warfare. Jason Blair has a breakdown on what's being done and why. Senators on Capitol Hill probe the Chinese Communist Party's debt trap diplomacy in Africa. They discuss new strategies to partner with African countries to counter the CCP's harmful impact on the region. And President Trump's 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum go into effect today, with Britain exempted. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he believes the tariff will soon be reduced to zero. Malcolm Hudson reports after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In response to the Chinese Communist Party's increasing threats to state and national security, more states have been taking action. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
Many states are clamping down on the CCP's aggression and transnational repression tactics, focusing on areas including restricting land ownership, protecting critical infrastructure, and countering espionage and influence operations. Arkansas, the past couple of years, has enforced Chinese state-linked entities to divest from any owned farmland. It was the first state to do this. Most states have either taken similar action or are currently considering passing similar laws. Missouri won a $24 billion judgment against the CCP in a COVID-related lawsuit in March. The state can now potentially seize Chinese-held assets, including farmland. And Texas passed an anti-transnational repression law in May. Its intention is to combat CCP activities targeting individuals, particularly those of Chinese descent, who speak out against the CCP, attempting to silence and intimidate them.
Well, many Americans are unaware that China specifically targets states in the United States to undermine what's going on in the United States of America. They have been in Texas going after Chinese dissidents who left China, and they are legally in the state of Texas now.
Arizona became the 5th state to ban Chinese-linked organ transplants, with Governor Katie Hobbs signing the Arizona and Organ Harvesting Act in May. Texas, Utah, Idaho, and Tennessee have passed similar laws. However, on June 2nd, Hobbs vetoed a bill that would ban China from purchasing land in the state. She said it was, quote, ineffective at counter-espionage. The bill's sponsor, Arizona Senator Janae Shamp, criticized the move by Hobbs, saying it was, quote, politically motivated and, quote, obstructionist. China has a long history of advancing its ambitions by operating in gray areas, using dual-use programs and technology, and more straightforward aggression like bribing and hacking. For example, Volt Typhoon is a Chinese state-sponsored hack group that has been targeting critical infrastructure. The attacks prompted sanctions from the U.S. and U.K. in 2024.
These cyber operations are part of a broader, coordinated effort by the Chinese Communist Party targeting everything from water utilities in Hawaii to oil pipelines on the West Coast and even the Texas power grid. We must understand that this isn't just a cyber threat. This is part of the CCP's larger strategy to destroy the American way of life.
And also in 2024, a Chinese agent was sentenced to 20 months in prison for attempting to bribe the IRS. The goal was to manipulate the agency to strip performing arts group Shenyun of its nonprofit status. Shenyun is a classical Chinese dance show and was founded by Falun Gong practitioners fleeing persecution in China. Shenyun's shows are known to have segments that expose ongoing arrests and human rights abuses that Falun Gong practitioners face in China. Falun Gong is a meditation practice that focuses on living with truth, compassion, and forbearance. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
36 years after the Tiananmen Square massacre, the image of an unidentified civilian blocking a row of tanks has become one of the most iconic photos of all time. Although no one knows the man's whereabouts, his message remains clear. NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people about the spirit and legacy of Tank Man.
Have you guys seen this picture anywhere?
Yes. Yeah, it's from Tiananmen Square.
And tell us what it is.
It was the protest against the Chinese government.
I remember seeing it on the TV when it happened.
Really?
Yeah,
how were they
we are that old.
It's basically like they removed that from that whole country, right? That picture wasn't allowed to be shown anywhere, and it shut everything down. But that's like all I really know.
I have a friend who's Chinese, and her parents were here from China, from the Shanghai area, and they didn't like what had gone on, but they didn't know that much about it because in that country, it is not really broadcast.
That's about one of the bravest things, or perhaps some might think stupidest things you could do, but the thing about demonstrating is all you have to do is show up. And he showed up, only he showed up in front of a tank.
This picture was taken on June 5th, which is the day after the Tiananmen Square massacre. And this guy was the lone civilian who stood in front of a row of tanks. What are you guys' reaction to that?
I mean, it's pretty brave to do that. A little crazy.
I think heroic. I don't think a lot of people would risk their lives or the lives of their family to stand up for something they believe in. So, well, I was a teenager at the time, so it's quite scary to see. It's not something that you used to see.
There was shock and everything in the UK, definitely, about it all. So, yeah, not condoning it or anything. Well, the behaviour of the government and everything, obviously.
Well, when I originally heard about Tiananmen Square, I was concerned because I had been there years earlier as a tourist, and that just concerned me so much. And I don't think at the time I realized how very many people were really injured and killed in that.
Well, usually in China, a lot of people disappeared, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people got sent back for cultural re-education. Vicious people.
Growing impatience with Beijing, President Trump calls Chinese leader Xi extremely hard to make a deal with. Meanwhile, concerns mount over CCP influence and the smuggling of a fungus into the U.S., one classified as a potential agro-terror threat. We break it all down with Madeline Somerville and Mark Meckler tonight at 7 p.m. on Capitol Report. Senators on the Foreign Relations Committee examined the effects of the Chinese Communist Party's harmful influence in Africa and new strategies to counter it. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
China is exercising its military, economic, and political power and advancing its authoritarian agenda, all while undermining the sovereignty of African nations
The U.S. is changing its strategy in Africa to better counter China's harmful influence in the region. This means the U.S. will now shift from prioritizing humanitarian aid to investment and trade partnerships. The Chinese Communist Party's interest in the region has been driven by control of critical minerals to undercut the nationwide markets and other forms of market dominance that deprives the region. Take fishing, for instance.
That is the protein for the people. But when you see these Chinese trawlers coming in and utterly destroying the fishing grounds, then suddenly doing a beeline 60 miles offshore, meet a buy boat, offload all the fish, come back to port and say, oh, we didn't catch anything again today. The amount of food available for the Africans is much more expensive in much less supply.
The CCP has gained influence in Africa over the past couple decades by expanding its Belt and Road Initiative. This is a series of infrastructure projects like dams and ports, but they also double as military installations and surveillance centers.
Unfortunately, China expands its Belt and Road Initiative with surveillance, wired buildings, and infrastructure, debt-level leveraged aid.
Many times, these projects end up costing the host country too much that it can't pay back the Chinese regime and become indebted to them.
China's debt trap financing, which is often opaque, often accelerates corruption, typically does not serve the interests of the people or even the nations of Africa.
When all said and done, many of these projects even end up failing.
When a Chinese tailings dam collapsed and they dumped something like 40 million gallons of sulfuric acid into the Kafue River, just potentially destroying the livelihoods of 6 million people.
And the CCP is using its diplomatic power in Africa to prevent Taiwan from having any connection with them. In April, Somalia banned Taiwanese passport holders from entering the country, preventing the Taiwanese foreign minister from visiting the region.
That when they harass Taiwan like that, they would be putting in jeopardy or calling into question their relationship with us.
Going forward, the U.S. is aiming to make up for lost time to build economic relations with African nations and give them an alternative to the CCP. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Britain is exempt from the 50% steel and aluminum tariffs thanks to the U.S.-UK trade deal, but only on the condition the deal is finalized and implemented before a deadline next month. The British steel industry welcomes the exemption, but worries about the uncertainty the deadline creates. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he is confident that tariffs on British steel and aluminium exports to the US will be reduced to zero soon. Starmer and President Trump last month agreed a US-UK trade deal that cuts levies on steel, aluminium and car imports to the US, in return for tariff reductions on beef and ethanol going to Britain. But it has yet to be fully implemented.
We have a deal, we're implementing it, and within a very short time I'm very confident we will get those tariffs down in accordance with the deal. Let's come back to this in just a couple of weeks when we've implemented it.
While other nations face 50% steel and aluminium tariffs, Trump exempted Britain and gave them until as soon as July 9th to finalise their trade deal. Tariffs on the UK still stand at 25% and are due to go down to zero with a deal. But failure to finalise it by the deadline would see the opposite, a jump to 50% tariffs. Both the steel industry and trade unions have urged the British government to finalise the agreement with Washington. Industry body UK Steel said Trump's decision to keep tariffs on British steel at 25% was, quote, a welcome pause, but warned that ongoing uncertainty was putting US customers off making orders from Britain. Chief economist at the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, John Glenn, said the tariffs so far have significantly impacted UK producers.
From the UK perspective, where we're selling basic steel products, we see a decline in our activity.
Glenn said the UK predominantly sells high-value steel products to the US, which the US can't substitute.
We see those products still going into North America, and the US consumer of those products, which is US industry, aerospace and defence, seen a significant increase in cost.
Increased prices in the US and lowered sales in the UK are first-order effects of the tariffs. Glenn also said the 50% steel tariffs will reduce the amount of Chinese steel entering America. This creates a second-order effect.
Chinese steel will now start to find its way into the European market, and we'll find a second round effect further down the line where we see the price of steel being reduced in Europe because of increased Chinese competition.
Starmer's official spokesperson did not guarantee the US-UK trade deal would be finalised by the July 9th deadline, instead saying they aim to implement the deal as quickly as possible and will provide an update in the coming weeks. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Coming up, South Korea's new president was sworn in today. The White House called the elections free and fair, but expressed concern about Chinese interference. What does the new leadership mean for Seoul's relationship with both the U.S. and China? Two China analysts join us to discuss after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The House's Armed Services Committee examines the U.S. Army's posture and capabilities ahead of drafting the appropriations bill for fiscal year 2026. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
We keep funding things that the military no longer uses or needs. And so I think it's a much needed conversation, and we're ready to work together in a bipartisan way to make our Army more efficient.
Do you agree that Congress has for years been appropriating funds for things that the Army doesn't need, and would you want to see that changed?
Yes, Congress is lazy. We need to be more efficient what we spend money on, and too often we keep spending money on programs just because we always have, not because it's what we need right now. So I think the transformation would be crucial.
Democrats and Republicans agreed that Congress has failed to address the budgetary issues that the Army faces.
The idea that China is our primary challenge, I agree with, but that challenge is global. It's not just in Asia. China's active everywhere in the world. This is a global competition.
Congress has not gone through a full appropriations process since 1997 and has heavily relied on continuing resolutions.
Well, we need to understand we're in the 21st century and that technologies are developing in a more rapid pace than our defense acquisition process. The United States government in the acquisition process has to start operating at the speed of business, not the speed of government, or we will not win the next war.
The Army's transformation initiative, directed by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, seeks to eliminate obsolete programs from the Army's budget, like the Apache helicopter, the Humvees, and the M10 Booker tank.
I mean, this is always a tricky balance, right? And I tell folks, it's not just about the top line spending, it's how is that money being deployed? And I will always come back and focus on the people wearing the uniform, their families, and making sure that we're taking care of their quality of life.
Despite the challenges, lawmakers also celebrated the Army's achievements this year.
The Army met the recruiting goals 4 months early. And you know why? Donald Trump is the president and Pete Hegseth is SecDef.
For the first time ever, the White House's budget request for the Department of Defense for fiscal year 2026 exceeds $1 trillion. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
South Korea's new president, Lee Jae-myung, was sworn in today after an election that the White House called free and fair, while also expressing concerns about Chinese interference. Joining us now from Seoul are two U.S.-China relations analysts. Colonel John Mills, he's a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy, and former U.S. Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice, Morris Tan. He's also the Dean of Liberty University School of Law. Thank you both so much for joining us. Good to see you both. Ambassador, starting with you, now that Lee has won the South Korean elections, given his backing by the Chinese Communist Party, what does his victory mean for relations between the U.S. and China?
Well, I think the U.S. recognizes the great power struggle that is happening, that the CCP has been very public about, and is going on all around the world. And so I think, given the gray zone activities that are going on around the world, but including in South Korea, I think that is something that there should be an awareness of. We have reports already that there is searches and seizures, I would deem them illegal searches and seizures, already going on in South Korea. And there's a real danger of political and religious persecution that looks like the Lee administration is not wasting any time to jump into.
Very concerning. Well, Colonel, speaking of that, President Trump is expected to have a call with Xi Jinping at some point soon. Do you see Li's victory impacting the substance of that call?
Well, absolutely. And the short two-part message put out by the U.S. government, I think, was very effective at acknowledging that Lee is the president of South Korea. However, and it was quite noted in South Korean media and again in press releases, these are very important nuances and signals. In the same same breath, it also voiced concern over Chinese Communist Party influence. So that actually was a huge message that was actually very noted by South Korean media. So yes, this is a full-blown great power competition, as the ambassador said. This is the world on fire, and so it remains to be seen during this call. Is South Korea brought up? What is the future of the historic ROC-U.S. alliance? And most importantly, we need to get an ambassador over here. We need an ambassador in place. There is only an acting ambassador. That is really, there's no substitute for a real ambassador who can assert America First values.
And digging into that, Ambassador, what about U.S.-South Korea relations? What changes can we expect there?
Well, there is concern because there were past statements about the U.S. being an occupying force. There is concern that there will be an attempt to remove U.S. forces that have been the largest deterrent against North Korean aggression, for example. And so there are real concerns here. There were more moderate statements made by Lee Jae-myung shortly before the election. We would like to see if he sticks with those more moderate statements and acts on those. That would be an improvement if he does so.
And Colonel, what about U.S. troops in South Korea? Has the new president said anything to hint at whether we'll see a drawdown in the U.S. presence there?
Well, past statements, of course, he is quite assertively, let's just be frank, he would like to see U.S. troops leave. He has used the term occupation force, and he has applauded Soviet and Chinese elements as liberators. So this is an odd situation. If you did a survey, Koreans, 70 to 80% would say America is their best friend. So it's odd trying to understand that in light of Lee being president, who has been quite a questioning of the U.S. ROC alliance. So I think now that he is president, he is going to have to be very careful with his comments and statements and actions, because the South Korean people, I don't think, really totally understood what was going on. And again, they are very strongly pro-U.S., and now there is a president who has questioned the alliance. I think there's a little bit of an orthogonal fit, and this remains to be worked out. And again, the absolute importance of an American ambassador over here to assert America First values will help maintain and perhaps even strengthen this alliance during the tenure of Lee.
And staying with you, Colonel, when it comes to the possibility of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, how does this election fit into that?
Well, again, the American ambassador would help absolutely lock in that ROC-U.S. alliance and make it firm, not make it wobbly. And so the reality is, and this is why the Chinese were so interested in influence activities in Korea, and it is a pervasive, far greater than I expected in Korean culture, and a lot of Koreans don't really understand or are aware of it. But that three-way alliance of the Republic of Korea, Japan, and the U.S. provides an absolute solid shield of protection for Taiwan, especially from the northern approaches. with South Korea, perhaps a little bit unclear as to what it'll do in when China attacks. That is some question, but again, that's where that U.S. ambassador is so important. So that three-way alliance is so important, defending the right shoulder of Taiwan.
And Ambassador, when it comes to interference, there's growing global awareness of China's transnational repression, including in South Korea. Now under pressure and economic coercion from the CCP, U.S.-based performing arts company Shinyuan, which showcases China before communism, was largely blocked from performing in South Korea in 2024. Now some performances were able to go ahead this year due to a court ruling, but shows were still limited. What can you tell us about the long arm of the CCP in South Korea?
Yes, we're very concerned about that. We had a past instance under the presidency of Moon Jae-in where that anti-missile deployments were halted, and there were many informal economic sanctions applied to South Korea due to the installation of the initial battery along these lines. And so there are also reports based on an agreement that President Moon had done of CCP infiltration into the South Korean police force, and for these police to act more like a paramilitary type force. And so there are profound concerns. There has also been a flooding of those that the CCP is sending to South Korea. And given the civil-military fusion that is the norm of the CCP, that is of profound concern as well. And in terms of basic liberties and freedoms and rights that should be there in a properly functioning democracy, constitutional democracy, there are tremendous concerns about that moving forward in terms of free expression, religious liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. These are all basic rights and freedoms that should be bolstered and strengthened in the face of past incursions by the CCP and concerns about future ones.
And on that note, Colonel, when it comes to countering transnational repression and CCP influence, how could the Trump administration work with the new Lee administration? Could we see Trump leveraging trade or tariffs?
That seems to be an approach that he is taking that is targeted the most at the CCP. If you just look at the numbers on the tariffs that have been put forward, that does seem to be an important element. There also has been movement prior to the election with respect to the economic cooperation between the U.S. and South Korea. We would like to see that things continue to move in that direction. But yes, tariffs are a tool that President Trump is using, and the central country and central party that these are being directed towards is the CCP. And so it would not surprise me to see that approach continue.
And Colonel Mills, your thoughts on all of that?
Well, there's a lot of tools in the toolkit from the American side to work with South Korea, even if President Lee is, in his heart of hearts, not liking of the ROC alliance, the U.S. ROC alliance. There's a lot of tools in the toolkit to really encourage that. And and even things like instead of, for the time being, instead of discussing shrinking the U.S. alliance, where the U.S. could make a proposal to increase presence here in light of regional tensions in the Western Pacific, which would, in many ways, kind of throw President Lee off his footing and his agenda in his heart of hearts. And again, the South Korean people are extremely pro-U.S. Again, it's a little hard to explain a little bit that difference between being pro-U.S. and yet Lee is the president right now. But again, properly done, we have a vast array can use to increase and strengthen the ROC-U.S. alliance.
Colonel John Mills, Ambassador Morris Tan, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Tiffany.
New details following last month's fertility clinic bombing in California. The FBI says they have arrested an accomplice. NTD's David Lamb has more.
The FBI arrested a 32-year-old man at New York's JFK airport, accusing him of supplying explosive chemicals that led to the bombing of a fertility clinic in California. Daniel Jong-Yun Park, the Washington man, was taken into custody Tuesday night. Federal authorities allege that he shipped 180 pounds of ammonium nitrate to Guy Edward Bartkus, the 25-year-old who bombed the clinic and was killed in the incident. Earlier this year, authorities say both suspects met in California to experiment in bomb making. According to the FBI, Park and Bartkus met on internet forums and appeared to be motivated by anti-natalist ideology, a belief that having children is unethical. On May 17th, a bomb detonated in or near a car parked outside the American Reproductive Center's clinic in Palm Springs. Reports say that at least 4 others were injured in the blast. Officials said Bartkus intentionally targeted the fertility clinic as an act of terrorism. He tried to live stream the explosion but failed. The owner of the clinic said he was thankful that no embryos were lost and that he forgives the perpetrator. If convicted, Park would face up to 15 years in prison. David Lamb, NTD News.
Coming up in the NHL, it's Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals tonight between Edmonton and Florida. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start at the French Open as Novak Djokovic and Alexander Zverev are battling it out in the French Open quarterfinals. What's the latest here?
Yeah, and Djokovic actually ended up prevailing. Lost the first set to Zverev 6-4, but then won the next 3 to take the match. Now, probably Djokovic's biggest win of the season thus far. Zverev was ranked 3rd in the world. Djokovic, meanwhile, he's had a bit of a slow start to 2025, but he's definitely caught fire the past few weeks. Now, for him, it does not get much easier for the next round. His next opponent will be number 1 ranked Jannik Sinner. They'll face him in the quarterfinals. Sinner has not dropped a set in this tournament. Now, in the other men's semifinals, we've got number 2 Carlos Alcaraz will face off against number 8 ranked Lorenzo Musetti. Alcaraz is probably nearly as hot as Sinner. Now, Alcaraz beat American Tommy Paul in the last round in just 94 minutes, was very dominant in that match. So the men's semifinals all set for Friday. Tiff, we've got Novak Djokovic versus Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz against Lorenzo Musetti. So I'm pretty excited for that one.
Well, looking at the women's side of the draw, we have quite a Cinderella story going on.
Yeah, Louise Boisson, we just talked about her a couple of days ago. Number 361 ranked person in the world. Continued her incredible run today at the French Open, beating 6th ranked Mira Andreeva. So Boisson is on to the semifinals now. That is the farthest a wild card entry has ever made it at the French Open. And this is actually her first ever Grand Slam appearance. She's just the 3rd woman ever to make it to the semifinals of a Grand Slam in their first appearance. Let's listen to what she said after the match.
Yeah, for sure. I think every kid who play tennis have the dream to win a slam. More for French player to win Roland Garros for sure. So yeah, it's a dream for sure. I will go for the dream because my dream is to win it, not to be in the semifinal. So I will try to do my best for it. No, I don't think it's a miracle for sure. I have a little bit of luck also, but I think it's just as you said, the hard work that I put since I started playing tennis, and also last year with my rehab and everything is just a result of hard work, nothing else. No, for me the crowd is really not something that put pressure on me because they are with me. So it's just like I love to play with the crowd. I love to to hear my name when I want a point and everything. So for me, it's just something plus. You know, it's not pressure, but I think it's also really difficult for other players from other country. So no, for me, it's really nice to have them.
So elsewhere at the French Open, American Coco Gauff beat fellow American Madison Keys in the quarterfinals. It wasn't really that neither player was actually probably at their best. There was like combined 101 unforced errors in this match versus just 40 winners. Now Gauff herself had 10 double faults here, but she caught fire late in the match, won 8 of the last 9 games. So she rallies to go ahead and she'll play Boisson in one of the women's semifinals. Now the other semifinal will have 3-time defending French Open champion Iga Swiatek against number 1 ranked Aryna Sabalenka. So we got some big matches coming up here at the French Open. Both those semifinal matches will take place for the women tomorrow.
Lots to watch for there. While shifting gears to boxing, Manny Pacquiao is officially coming out of retirement next month for a championship bout in Las Vegas.
Yeah, he's taking on Mario Barrios for the WBC welterweight title. Now, Pacquiao has not fought since 2021. He's been much involved in Filipino politics since that time. Let's listen to what Pacquiao said regarding whether this is going to be a one-off match or whether he's continuing, a whole boxing career here.
Is this a one stop where it's going to fight July 19th and you see where you're at, or is it truly I'm back and I'm ready to make another run?
Yes, I'm back.
Mario,
first of all, I would like to thank God for this another opportunity in my life. And what I'm doing right now, I can't believe that Manny Pacquiao from 90s, I started my career of professional boxing in 1995. Until now, so amazingly, that's a blessings from God, and the fire, the determination, eagerness to train hard, to work hard. Even now, I'm enjoying working out hard, like running the mountain, working out in the afternoon, like amazing. Not all the fighters has this feelings. This is. Favor, blessings from God, I believe, and the strength. Can you imagine that I've been through all those big fights in my life, but I'm still here. Manny Pacquiao is back. So thank you to all of you for believing Manny Pacquiao and to all boxing industry. Good luck to all of us. Thanks.
So Pacquiao, 46 years old. He's the only boxer ever to win world championships in 8 different weight classes. He's also the record holder for the oldest welterweight champion when he won it in 2019 at age 40. Of course, if he wins this coming match, he will break that record. So that fight, July 19 in Las Vegas against Mario Barrios. Excited for that one too, Tiff.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of betting there. While looking at hockey news, tonight is Game 1 of the NHL Stanley Cup Finals between the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. Now, this is a rematch of last year's finals when Florida won. So what are you expecting this time around?
I kind of think Edmonton is going to turn the trick this time around. Like he said, they lost last year. If you remember, Florida last year won the first 3 games of the series. Edmonton then stormed back to force a Game 7. Florida won, though, in Florida 2-1 to take the Stanley Cup title. Now, it certainly doesn't hurt this time that Edmonton has the home ice advantage, although I will grant Florida has been very good on the road in these playoffs. They are 8-2. They won very pivotal game 5 and Game 7 on the road at Toronto in the second round. Now, as for the makeup of the teams, they're actually very similar from last time around, but I kind of think Edmonton is going to have revenge on their minds this time around. So tonight, Game 1 in Edmonton, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So, big day in sports here, Tiff, They definitely matter, all right? Sports matters.
High stakes on the ice. Hall Davis, always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.